July 17th, 1984. The day dawned with a dense fog cloaking the slopes of the Serra de Mantiqueira, on the border between the states of São Paulo and Minas Gerais. The temperature had dropped drastically during the night, plummeting to near freezing, a common occurrence in that mountainous region during the Brazilian winter. It was in this setting that Carlos Eduardo Mendes, a 32-year-old biologist from the University of São Paulo, set out for another day of data collection for his research on ancient tree species of the Mantiqueira. Carlos was a respected researcher, dedicated to the study of centennial trees and their adaptations to climate change. Tall, with a neatly trimmed beard and always wearing black-rimmed glasses, he was known for his meticulous nature and his habit of documenting every detail of his expeditions. Married for just 2 years to Helena, a literature professor, he had no children but planned to start a family after completing his doctorate. That Tuesday morning, Carlos left the small researcher's lodge at 7:30 a.m., as recorded in the base's logbook. He carried a backpack with collection equipment, a notebook, a camera, a compass, a Swiss Army knife, and enough water and food for the day. He was dressed in cargo pants, hiking boots, and a navy blue thermal jacket. His plan was to explore a remote area of the Serra do Papagaio State Park, a place known to harbor some of the oldest trees in Brazil. According to the plan filed at the base, Carlos was due to return by 6 o'clock p.m. that same day. When the clock struck 7 o'clock p.m. and there was still no sign of the researcher, his colleagues showed no immediate concern. Delays of an hour or two were common, given the difficult terrain and Carlos's enthusiasm whenever he found an interesting specimen. By 9 o'clock p.m., however, the base coordinator, Dr. Roberto Almeida, issued the first alert. Attempts to reach him by radio went unanswered. The outside temperature had fallen to 3 degrees Celsius, and concern grew considerably. An initial search party of 3 experienced researchers departed immediately, following the route Carlos had outlined in his plan. The next morning, July 18th, with the disappearance now confirmed, the environmental military police were notified. The search intensified, now with the aid of sniffer dogs and teams specialized in mountain rescue. News of the disappearance began to spread through the small towns of the region, like Campos do Jordão, São Bento do Sapucaí, and Gonçalves. Carlos's wife, Helena, arrived at the research base late that day, visibly distraught, bringing recent photos and personal items that might help the tracking dogs. "He knows these trails so well. Something must have happened," she repeated, as she provided information about her husband's habits that might aid the search. The weather worsened over the following days as a cold front brought freezing rain and drastically reduced visibility on the higher slopes. Nevertheless, the search continued, now with support from armed forces helicopters, which flew over the area whenever conditions permitted. 1 week after the disappearance, authorities found the first concrete clue. Carlos's notebook, partially damaged by moisture, was located near an area of dense forest dominated by ancient araucaria trees. The last entries, dated July 17th, mentioned the discovery of an extraordinary specimen, possibly over 1,000 years old, with an unusual internal cavity. There were, however, no precise coordinates or details that could identify the exact location of the tree. The search for Carlos Eduardo Mendes continued intensely for another 2 weeks, mobilizing hundreds of volunteers, including firefighters, police officers, researchers, and local residents. The Serra do Papagaio State Park, with its 23,000 hectares of dense forest, deep valleys, and steep slopes, presented a monumental challenge for the rescue teams. Detective Mauricio Campos from the Campos do Jordão Police Department took charge of the police investigation, working in parallel with the search and rescue operations. His first line of inquiry was to meticulously interview every researcher at the base and any hikers who were in the region in the days leading up to the disappearance. "We need to understand exactly what he was looking for and where," the detective stated during a press conference held 10 days after Carlos vanished. By then, the case had gained national attention, with special reports on the country's main news programs. On August 4, 1984, the investigative team managed to recover the last photos taken with Carlos's camera, which was found among rocks about 7 kilometers from the research base. The images, though partially damaged by exposure to the elements, revealed what appeared to be an immense tree, with characteristics of a Jequitiba rosa, or another large species of the Lecythidaceae family, featuring an unusual opening in its trunk. Dr. Paulo Vasconcelos, a dendrologist and a colleague of Carlos at the university, was called in to analyze the photographs. "From its size and visible features, we are looking at a truly ancient specimen, possibly over 1,000 years old," the specialist observed. "What's most intriguing is this opening in the trunk. It doesn't appear to be natural, but it also shows no clear signs of recent human intervention." A new search front was organized, now focused on locating that specific tree. Using the photos as a reference and analyzing the visible geological patterns, the team managed to narrow the search area to a specific valley, known locally as the Valley of Shadows, due to the dense canopy that limited the entry of sunlight. Meanwhile, the police investigation explored other possibilities. Carlos's personal and professional history was thoroughly examined. Interviews with colleagues and family revealed that in the weeks before his disappearance, the biologist had shown a growing excitement about a theory he was developing, one that involved trees serving as ancestral cultural portals. It was something he mentioned in conversation but had written little about in his official records. Helena, in a detailed statement, recalled her husband talking about local legends involving sacred trees. He became fascinated with stories he heard from old residents about trees that swallowed people or served as refuges in ancient times, she declared. "I thought it was just folkloric interest, part of the cultural context of his research." An intriguing lead emerged when a 92-year-old resident of São Bento do Sapucaí, Joaquim Silveira, approached the authorities claiming to know about the swallowing tree. According to his statement recorded on August 12th, there was an ancient tree in the region which, according to legends passed down through generations, possessed an internal cavity where time passed differently. "My grandfather used to say it was a sacred place for the indigenous people who lived here before the Portuguese arrived," the old man recounted in testimony that was initially met with skepticism. "They said that whoever entered that tree could stay there for years, but when they came out they would think only a day had passed." However, the description and approximate location provided by Mr. Joaquim coincided surprisingly with the area where Carlos's last clues had been found. A specialized team, now including anthropologists, was dispatched to investigate the connection. On August 23rd, after 37 days of intense searching, the authorities officially scaled back the operation, keeping only smaller teams active. Carlos's family, unwilling to give up, hired private investigators to continue the search. But the official hypotheses were now divided between a fatal accident in a hard-to-reach area, an attack by a wild animal, or disorientation followed by hypothermia. None of these theories, however, satisfactorily explained the complete absence of further traces. No clothing, no equipment, and most significantly, no human remains. The tree mentioned in Carlos's final notes was never officially located at that time, becoming an almost mythical element in the narrative of his disappearance. The case of Carlos Eduardo Mendes gradually faded from the national news as 1984 drew to a close, but it was never forgotten in the scientific community or among the residents of the Mantiqueira region. Helena, his wife, refused to hold a symbolic funeral, clinging to the hope that the mystery would one day be solved. In the years that followed, she established the Carlos Mendes Foundation, dedicated to the research and conservation of ancient trees in Brazil, and to supporting families of people who have disappeared in natural areas. "I turned absence into purpose," she stated in an interview in 1994, 10 years after he vanished. The Valley of Shadows, where the last clues were found, was the subject of several scientific expeditions in the following decades. In 1998, an international team of botanists mapped and catalogued all trees in that area, estimated to be over 500 years old, but none matched the description or photographs left by Carlos. In 2005, with advances in satellite imaging, a new attempt to map the region revealed an anomaly in the forest canopy, a single point where one tree stood out significantly from the others in size. The area, however, had become virtually inaccessible after a major landslide in 2002 drastically altered the local topography. It wasn't until 2019 that the area became accessible again. An expedition led by Dr. Amanda Race, a former student of Carlos and now a senior researcher, set out to investigate the tree identified in the satellite images. "We want to close this chapter," Dr. Race declared, "not just for science, but for everyone affected by this mystery." After 5 days of trekking through extremely rugged terrain, the team located the immense tree. It was a Jequitibá rosa of extraordinary dimensions, approximately 40 meters tall, with a trunk diameter of over 4 meters. Experts estimated its age at around 1,200 years. Most impressively, there was a natural opening at the base of the trunk, forming an internal chamber large enough to hold a standing adult. The features matched Carlos's notes and photographs remarkably. The team conducted extensive non-invasive studies, but no direct evidence related to the disappearance of Carlos was found. The tree, now officially documented and protected, was named Cariniana mendesii, in honor of the missing researcher. The true turning point in the case came unexpectedly on February 11, 2023, when a historic storm hit the Serra de Mantiqueira. Winds exceeding 120 kilometers per hour and torrential rains caused widespread destruction. Among the casualties of that natural catastrophe was the Cariniana mendesii itself, which could not withstand the assault of wind and saturated soil. A team of researchers led by dendrochronologist Dr. Ricardo Fernandes obtained permission to study the growth rings of the fallen giant, a unique opportunity to access centuries of the region's climate history. It was during this painstaking analysis, which began in March 2023, that they made the discovery that would reignite the case of Carlos Eduardo Mendes. While examining the internal structure of the fallen trunk, specifically the region of the cavity, the researchers found objects embedded within the wood, objects that were unmistakably human and contemporary. "What we have discovered," Dr. Fernandes stated at a press conference on April 17, 2023, "defies our understanding." Embedded in the tree's internal structure, as if gradually enveloped by its natural growth, we found a wristwatch, fragments of synthetic fabric consistent with 1980s mountaineering gear, and what appears to be a partially preserved pair of glasses. The discovery completely transformed the investigation. The wristwatch, a Seiko chronograph, was positively identified as the same one Carlos was wearing on the day he disappeared, a fact confirmed by Helena and by photographs from the time. Even more extraordinary was the watch's condition. Forensic analysis showed that its mechanism had stopped at 3:47 p.m. The date displayed was July 17th, the very day Carlos vanished in 1984. A detailed examination of how the objects were embedded within the tree's structure revealed a pattern that was biologically impossible to explain. The natural growth of a tree like this occurs in layers from the inside out, explained Dr. Tatiana Lopez, a forensic botanist called in to analyze the findings. If these objects had been inserted into the tree in 1984, they should have been covered by approximately 40 annual growth rings. However, what we observed is that they appear to have been enveloped by much older layers of the internal structure, as if they were absorbed into the trunk rather than grown around. This baffling anomaly led to the formation of an unprecedented multidisciplinary team, bringing together botanists, physicists, anthropologists, and forensic investigators to try and comprehend the phenomenon. Carbon-14 dating performed on the organic matter surrounding the objects produced inconsistent and, in some cases, scientifically impossible results. We have sections of wood that, according to the tests, are between 800 and 1,000 years old, yet they contain perfectly preserved modern synthetic fibers, reported Dr. Paulo Andrade, the nuclear physicist responsible for the dating tests. It's as if time itself behaved differently inside that cavity. In parallel with the scientific investigations, the federal police officially reopened the case of Carlos Eduardo Mendes. Modern analysis of the recovered materials, using technologies unavailable in 1984, revealed partial fingerprints that were confirmed as belonging to the missing biologist. Other recovered items included fragments of a notebook with handwritten, partially legible notes. On one of the best-preserved pages, Carlos's handwriting was identified with the following entry: 1707, 1530. The internal cavity is surprisingly larger than it appears from the outside. The temperature in here is stable, approximately 20 degrees Celsius, a stark contrast to the cold outside. There is something unusual about the acoustics and the light. I will continue to explore. This would be the last known note made by Carlos, chronologically consistent with the time registered on the recovered watch. But what could have happened after that moment? How could his belongings have been incorporated into the tree's internal structure in a way that defies the known laws of plant biology? In August 2023, an unexpected development brought new perspectives to the case. Anthropologists researching ancient indigenous legends of the region found historical records of the Puri and Coroados peoples, the original inhabitants of the Serra da Mantiqueira, which mentioned a tree of time, or portal of the ancestors. According to these accounts, preserved in manuscripts from 18th century Jesuit missionaries, there existed in the region a sacred tree where time flowed like water between the banks of worlds. The indigenous people considered it a place of connection with other temporal dimensions and treated it with extreme respect and fear. These narratives were once considered mere mythology, but in light of the recent discoveries, we must reevaluate our understanding of ancestral knowledge, observed Dr. Marina Silveira, an anthropologist from the University of São Paulo specializing in indigenous ethnobotany. In September 2023, microscopic analysis of samples from the tree's internal cavity revealed another extraordinary element: the presence of a fungus unknown to science, provisionally classified as Chronomyces mantiqueirensis. This organism exhibited unique biochemical properties, including the ability to metabolize the tree's cellulose in previously undocumented ways. This fungus may be the key to understanding the anomalies we've observed, proposed Dr. Henrique Montero, the mycologist responsible for its identification. Its hyphae penetrate the wood layers in ways that alter the molecular structure of the cellulose, potentially creating conditions for phenomena that our current scientific paradigm cannot adequately explain. As the investigation progressed, Helena Mendes, now 71, followed each development with a mixture of renewed hope and philosophical acceptance. In an exclusive interview granted in October 2023, she reflected, "I spent almost 40 years searching for answers about Carlos. Now I realize that perhaps some questions don't have answers we can comprehend with our current science. What we know for certain is that he was doing what he loved, exploring the mysteries of nature. The scientific community remains divided on the interpretation of the facts. A more conservative faction maintains that Carlos likely suffered a fatal accident within the tree's cavity, and that the observed phenomena, though unusual, will eventually find an explanation within established scientific paradigms. Another line of thought, more open to unorthodox possibilities, proposes that the case may represent evidence of as yet ununderstood natural phenomena, possibly related to localized temporal distortions or alternative states of matter under extremely specific conditions. The Carlos Mendes case confronts us with the limits of our knowledge, observed Dr. Ricardo Fernandez in his lecture at the International Symposium on Botanical Anomalies in December 2023. Perhaps we are facing a phenomenon that requires not just new answers but new questions. In January 2024, the Carlos Mendes Foundation, in partnership with Brazilian and international universities, established Project Kronos, an interdisciplinary research program dedicated to studying temporal phenomena associated with long-lived organisms. The site where the fallen tree was found has become a permanent research station, and seeds collected from the original specimen are being cultivated for future study. As for the ultimate fate of Carlos Eduardo Mendes, the mystery remains technically unsolved. Officially, his status was changed from missing to extraordinary case under continuous investigation, a classification created specifically for this situation. For science, the case has opened new frontiers of research at the intersections of botany, quantum physics, and anthropology. For the general public, it has become a powerful reminder that nature still holds secrets capable of challenging our understanding of the world and perhaps of time itself. The tree that fell in the Serra de Mantiqueira in 2023 did not just reveal objects from 4 decades ago. It also revealed the limitations of our knowledge and the possibility that seemingly impossible realities may exist in the interstices of what we consider explainable. As Helena Mendes wrote in the preface to the book The Tree of Time, published in March 2024, Carlos is no longer lost. He has found his place in the grand narrative of the mysteries that drive science forward. And in that sense, he is more present than ever, inspiring new generations to look upon the unknown not with fear but with the same fascination that led him to that tree on a winter's day almost 40 years ago. The year 2024 marked a profound transformation in how the scientific community and Brazilian society understood the case of Carlos Eduardo Mendes. What began as a personal tragedy and a local mystery evolved into a phenomenon of global relevance, drawing researchers of various nationalities to the Serra da Mantiqueira. In April 2024, an international conference in Campos do Jordão brought together over 300 scientists from 27 countries, all dedicated to studying the various aspects of what was now known as the Mendes phenomenon. The event, live-streamed to universities worldwide, solidified the region as a hub for interdisciplinary research. A complete molecular analysis of the fungus, Chronomyces mantiqueirensis, revealed even more surprising properties. Its enzymes demonstrated a unique ability to alter the structure of lignin, an essential component of wood, in ways that defied the established principles of organic chemistry. In controlled laboratory conditions, samples of this fungus induced changes in the radioactive decay rate of certain isotopes, suggesting an unprecedented interaction with the space-time continuum. We are just beginning to grasp the implications of these discoveries, stated Dr. Sophia Chen, a theoretical physicist from MIT who joined the Brazilian team at Project Kronos. The fungus appears to create microenvironments where the physical constants that regulate the flow of time exhibit measurable variations. It's as if microscopic temporal bubbles exist within the tree's structure. In May 2024, a significant development occurred when researchers managed to recover and process more fragments from Carlos's notebook using advanced digital restoration techniques. Among the partially legible notes, one particular passage caught their attention. 1707, 1615 approximately, something extraordinary is happening. The light inside the cavity seems to pulse at irregular frequencies. My watch is behaving erratically. The sensation is of being simultaneously in motion and completely static. Are the internal walls of the tree responsive, reactive to human presence? There is a pattern in the internal stains that is remarkably reminiscent of fractal structures. I'm going to try. The note ended abruptly at this point. Forensic analysis of the subsequent pages indicated attempts at writing, but with progressively more disordered patterns, as if the author was experiencing increasing difficulty in coordinating his movements or maintaining linear consciousness. Helena, upon being presented with this new evidence, showed a surprising serenity. Carlos always said that true scientific research must take us to places where our certainties are challenged. It seems he found exactly that, in a way none of us could have foreseen. In June 2024, the Carlos Mendes Nature Reserve was officially inaugurated, encompassing 5,000 hectares of native forest in the Serra da Mantiqueira, including the site where the ancient tree had fallen. The space combined rigorous environmental preservation with state-of-the-art research facilities, allowing for the continuous study not only of the specific phenomenon, but of the entire unique ecosystem of the region. An unexpected development occurred in July 2024, when 3 other trees in the same region, all estimated to be over 800 years old, began to exhibit characteristics similar to the original Cariniana mendiae. Internal cavities formed spontaneously in their trunks, and preliminary analyses detected the presence of the same mysterious fungus in their structures. It's as if we are witnessing a contagious phenomenon among organisms we would normally consider static and isolated, observed Dr. Fernandez. These trees are communicating through subterranean mycorrhizal networks, sharing not just nutrients but apparently this extraordinary characteristic as well. In August 2024, exactly 40 years after Carlos's disappearance, a symbolic ceremony brought together scientists, authorities, and family members at the nature reserve. A monument was erected on the exact spot where the original tree had stood, bearing the inscription, "Here, the boundaries between science and mystery dissolve," in honor of Carlos Eduardo Mendes, who transcended the limits of knowledge. During the ceremony, Helena Mendes, accompanied by Andrea, Carlos's niece, who had followed in her uncle's footsteps to become a biologist specializing in forest ecology, planted a seedling cultivated from the seeds of the original tree. "We continue the story," she declared simply as the young sapling was carefully placed in the soil. The case of Carlos Eduardo Mendes became a landmark in Brazilian scientific history, inspiring a new generation of researchers to explore the frontiers between traditionally separate disciplines. The term Mendesian science came to describe approaches that combine methodological rigor with an openness to seemingly inexplicable phenomena. In the field of education, the national science curriculum was updated to include case studies on the Mendes phenomenon, encouraging students to develop critical and creative thinking in the face of scientific anomalies. A special research grant program funded by the Carlos Mendes Foundation now supports young scientists interested in exploring unexplained natural phenomena. Beyond the scientific community, the case captured the popular imagination, inspiring literary works, documentaries, and even an international series produced by a major streaming service. The book, The Man the Tree Absorbed, written by journalist Riccardo Bonetti, became an international bestseller in 2024, translated into 28 languages. In October 2024, an international symposium at the University of São Paulo brought together scientists from diverse fields to present and debate theories about the Mendes phenomenon. The hypotheses that emerged can be classified into three broad categories, each representing different paradigms in the attempt to explain the unexplainable. The first theoretical line, termed the advanced biochemical hypothesis, was presented by Dr. Yoshiro Tanaka, a biochemist from Kyoto University. According to this theory, the Chronomyces mantiqueirensis fungus co-evolved with ancient trees to develop biochemical compounds capable of altering the temporal and spatial perception of organisms that come into contact with its spores. These compounds would have extraordinary psychoactive properties, affecting not only cognition but also the interaction between consciousness and matter, explained Dr. Tanaka. Carlos Eduardo would have entered a state of altered consciousness so profound that his physical body was gradually assimilated into the tree's molecular structure in a process of unprecedented biointegration. This theory, though still speculative, received support from neuroscientists who pointed to the growing evidence that human consciousness can influence physical systems at quantum levels under specific conditions. The second theoretical current, known as the localized space-time distortion theory, was championed by the team led by Dr. Helena Kovács, a Hungarian theoretical physicist. According to this hypothesis, certain combinations of geological, biomagnetic, and gravitational factors can create pockets where space-time behaves non-linearly. The Serra de Mantiqueira possesses unique geological features with high concentrations of rare minerals and rock formations that can act as natural amplifiers of terrestrial magnetic fields, explained Dr. Kovács. The ancient tree, with its biologically complex structure and the presence of the singular fungus, may have functioned as a resonator for these anomalies, creating a localized temporal distortion within the cavity. This theory posited that Carlos had been ensnared within a kind of temporal bubble, a pocket of reality where the internal flow of time differed drastically from the outside world. For him, mere minutes or hours might have elapsed, while on the outside, decades had swept by. The third and most controversial line of inquiry was the dimensional portal hypothesis, proposed by Dr. Alejandro Vega, a theoretical physicist from the Barcelona Institute for Advanced Physics. This approach suggested that the specific combination of factors present at the tree had created a transient gateway to a parallel dimension or an alternative state of existence. Quantum physics teaches us that reality is far more complex and interconnected than our senses can perceive, argued Dr. Vega. The indigenous accounts of the time tree might be cultural interpretations of a genuine physical phenomenon, transition points between distinct dimensional states that occasionally manifest in specific locations within our universe. This theory, though deemed speculative by most of the scientific community, gained significant attention for its ability to unify both the observed physical anomalies and the historical cultural elements associated with the site. Regardless of the adopted theory, a consensus emerged among the researchers. The Carlos Mendes case represents an inflection point in contemporary science, challenging the boundaries between disciplines and forcing a re-evaluation of established paradigms. Perhaps Carlos's true legacy is not just the phenomenon that bears his name, but the scientific humility it inspires in us, reflected Dr. Fernandez at the symposium's conclusion. We are reminded that, for all our technological advancements, nature still guards fundamental mysteries, waiting for minds open enough to recognize them and brave enough to explore them. In January of 2025, an extraordinary discovery added a new layer of complexity to the case. During the digitization of historical archives from the Brazilian Federal Police, records were found of 3 other disappearances in the same Serra da Mantiqueira region, occurring at intervals of approximately 40 years, in 1904, 1944, and 1984, the latter being the case of Carlos Eduardo Mendes. In each incident, the circumstances bore remarkable similarities. The missing persons were researchers or explorers. All had mentioned ancient trees in their last known records, and in none of the cases were remains or conclusive evidence of their fate ever found. This periodicity is mathematically significant, observed documentarian Camila Souza, an astronomer from the National Observatory and a specialist in cosmic cycles. The 40-year interval coincides with certain astronomical alignments and solar activity cycles that could, in theory, intensify terrestrial magnetic fields in specific locations. The most intriguing connection emerged from the 1904 case, when British naturalist Edward Hartley vanished during a botanical expedition in the region. In his diary, recovered weeks after his disappearance, the final entry contained a detailed sketch of a tree, remarkably similar to the Cariniana mendice, accompanied by the annotation: extraordinary internal cavity, anomalous temperature, pulsating light, time behaving erratically. The 1944 case involved Brazilian geologist João Martins, who disappeared while mapping rock formations in the mountains. His field notebook, found alongside his abandoned equipment, contained the enigmatic final observation: the tree absorbs, time folds upon itself, I will be here tomorrow and yesterday. These discoveries prompted the formation of a special task force bringing together historians, forensic scientists, and researchers from Project Kronos to investigate the possible connections between the 3 cases. Comparative analysis of soil samples, historical climate records, and astronomical data revealed significant correlations, suggesting a cyclical phenomenon possibly influenced by a convergence of cosmic, geological, and biological factors at specific intervals. In March of 2025, an unexpected breakthrough occurred during archaeological excavations near the site where the ancient tree had fallen. A team led by Dr. Paulo Ribeiro, an archaeologist from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, unearthed an indigenous artifact dated to approximately the 14th century. It was a wooden tablet with inscriptions that, after detailed analysis, proved to be an astronomical calendar marking 40-year cycles, with specific symbols for the years 1904, 1944, 1984, and 2024. This artifact suggests that the region's original inhabitants were aware of this cycle and considered it significant enough to document, Dr. Ribeiro explained. The inscriptions include symbols that can be interpreted as portal, passage, or crossing, always associated with depictions of ancient trees. In April of 2025, the 3 saplings cultivated from the original tree's seeds, now just over a year old, began to exhibit anomalous growth patterns. Genetic analyses revealed inexplicable modifications in their DNA, resulting in traits that corresponded neither to the parent tree nor to any other known species. It's as if we are witnessing an accelerated and directed evolution, observed Dr. Andrea Mendes, Carlos's niece and now the lead researcher on the propagation project. These saplings are incorporating genetic characteristics that would normally take centuries to develop. In one of the saplings, a minuscule cavity was already forming in its developing trunk, replicating on a smaller scale the most distinctive feature of the original tree. Microscopic analysis confirmed the presence of the fungus Chronomyces mantiqueirensis in its earliest stage of development, suggesting a symbiotic relationship established from the very beginning of the plant's growth. As 2025 progressed, the international scientific community remained divided on the fundamental nature of the Mendes phenomenon. However, a consensus gradually emerged. Whatever the final explanation, humanity was facing a natural event that defied the traditional boundaries of science and could potentially transform our understanding of the relationship between time, space, consciousness, and matter. For Helena Mendes, now the honorary coordinator of the Carlos Mendes Nature Reserve, the search for definitive answers had become less important than the transformative impact her husband's legacy continued to have on science and society. Carlos always said that the right questions are more valuable than incomplete answers, she reflected during an interview in July 2025. The greatest tribute we can pay him is not to solve the mystery definitively, but to allow this mystery to continue inspiring new generations to look beyond the limits of the known. While scientists worldwide continue to study the Mendes phenomenon, the fallen tree in the Serra da Mantiqueira remains a potent symbol of how many secrets nature still holds, and how the quest for knowledge sometimes leads us to destinations that transcend our immediate comprehension. If you enjoyed this exploration into one of Brazil's most profound recorded mysteries, we invite you to show your support by liking this documentary, subscribing to our channel, and sharing it with friends who appreciate mysteries that challenge our understanding of reality. The truth, as this ancient tree has taught us, has roots far deeper and branches far wider than we can possibly imagine.